Well, I'm going to tell you. I've been wondering about how to go about this because you are museum people, but I work with the present moment more or less. Because I'm a therapist and I'm a therapist on TV with. I have made a TV program. Um, that is called Jeg mot meg, which means in the English version is going to be called True Selfie, of all things. And it's a program where we have a group of young people in group therapy for 12 weeks, and during this time they also document their daily lives in a video diary. And I have also made a podcast which is out now. It's called Hos Peder. English title will be Talking with Peder, which is individual therapy. More or less the same format. It's 12 sessions of therapy, and we have a short reflection. The client have a short reflection, and I have a short reflection about what all this is. And the new thing about this is that we are documenting change process as it unfolds, rather than documenting history. This is not a program where we have young people telling their stories. Of course they tell their stories, but the point is not their history. We don't try to sort of show what it's like to be young or something like that. It's about the change process. It's about therapy. So it's about life unfolding on camera. So this is not past history or a freeze frame of troubled youth. This is stories unfolding, and the question I was thinking about a little bit more now that I had to talk to you about this than I have been thinking about it before, actually, is why? Why should we tell these stories? And of course I had some answers to that. Yeah, this is from the group session. I don't know. Did any of you see it when it? Yeah. Or you have your noses in the archives. You don't care about the present moment. So and yeah, this is publicity shot for the podcast. So why telling the stories? Why telling stories in this way? And of course, the idea for the first idea for the True Selfie series was based on a drama series. Actually, it was called. What was it called again? I suddenly lost the name. That therapist guy who is. Do any of you remember it? There was a quite popular series about this therapist who had his clients, and then he had this private life, and it was individual therapy. It was called something. And the producer of this series was watching that, and she said, "Oh, how nice it would have been if this was real, if this wasn't fiction." And her husband, who is a director, said, "Yeah, why don't you go and make that?" And she had all sorts of problems with how to do that, because you can't really expose people in that way and so on. But I think he more or less talked her into trying to make a pilot of it anyway. And actually, it didn't work so well. They made this pilot of a real therapist and a real client talking away, and it didn't work. It didn't work, and the question is why. And the answer she came up with was that they are talking about things that happened. They are not talking about, we are not seeing things that are happening, we are seeing things that happened. So how to bring into the therapy things that are really happening right now. And that's how she came up with making it group therapy, because then you will have the interaction between everybody. And why should that be done? What's the point of doing that? The plan was, she had a, and also when I was asked to contribute to this, I was thinking in terms of a sort of social activism that is about promoting openness, about how it is to feel this way and how it is to be a young person who is confused about everything. I'm very interested in the threshold between youth and young adult age, when you are trying to find out who you are going to be in this world. And I think one of the problems for young people at that stage in life is that they can't really talk about this to anybody. Everything is very it's very secret because because of shame. Because when you are a little bit too old to be a kid, and you are a little bit too young to be an adult, so you don't really fit in anywhere. There's something wrong with you, and that's the feeling of shame. And I think a cure to shame is openness, actually, because when people can see you and accept you and see how it is to be in that stage, I think that's worth doing. And also it's openness about the therapeutic process, because the therapeutic process and the therapist's office is one of the few spaces that in this society that is still sort of closed off, where there are cameras everywhere except in the therapist's office. And we were having this discussion, maybe there shouldn't be a camera in the therapist's office. Maybe that should be this sort of sacred place, like where you can not really hide, but where you can try out and unfold without any consequences or without anyone seeing. And that's one of the discussions that I had with other psychologists, of course. Should young people be free from this ever-present camera, or is it better to show even to show those uncertain baby steps that young people take? And I think when I remember my own youth, I felt very lonely at times, because I thought I was the only person in the world experiencing what I was experiencing. And I think that's very common. I think most young adults sort of have the feeling that they have to discover the world, and they have to do it all on their own, and they are terrified of it. And I think what helped me was reading books and about other people in the same situation, which are always popular among young people. Because you need to connect with someone, or you need to recognize yourself in someone else. And I'm thinking, I had the same experience now again, now that I'm 50 years old, when reading Karl Ove Knausgård's books. His what are they called in English? The Min Kamp-serien. It wasn't called My Struggle, is it? My Struggle, yeah. So his books are written from this a very subjective view. So that's and I think one of the things about openness that I want to promote is the interest in subjectivity. I think one can be interested in many things, but I think subjectivity, how is life experienced by other people, that will always be important for understanding your own way of living or understanding yourself. And I think also what we in the team who made this, we called it the Knausgård principle, which is that the more local things get, the more universal they are. So the more detailed and the more small and insignificant things are, the more they are universal. I think everyone can, I think most people will be able to connect to the subjectivity of Knausgård and his stories much more than sort of those big stories about heroes and all that. They are sort of ideal types, while Knausgård is just a little person like yourself. So, yeah, I want to promote openness about psychosocial problems. How is it to be a young person struggling to get a life going? And I want openness about the therapeutic process. And we want to promote the interest in the subjective, what we called the Knausgård principle then. So, the next question is how to do this. And this is where I'm a little bit uncertain about what you want from this story about making these programs. So I'm going to tell you how we made this, because as I understand it, you want in your museums you sometimes want to tell individual stories of people who lived or even people who are living, and there are a lot of things to take into consideration when you do that. So I'm just going to tell you how we did it when we were making a TV program in that way. And I hope that will be relevant, and I will appreciate any questions you have, just so we keep this relevant to your projects. So the first question was how to select participants. How do you get people to sort of creep out of their holes and tell their stories and expose themselves in this very vulnerable situation? Well, we figured that young people now, they are quite used to cameras, and they are on Facebook and they are on Twitter and all that. So we simply made this little ad that we put on Facebook. We are going to make a TV documentary documenting young people in a process. I don't remember the exact words because they were sort of vague. They were vague on purpose. We are going to make this thing about being alive, more or less, and we put that on Facebook, and we had more than 300 applicants in just a few days. So young people don't really fear cameras. So we had to select just 8, and we thought of many things. We thought about representativeness. We wanted these people to be recognizable, so we wanted to have someone with an eating disorder. We wanted to have someone with who was drinking too much and had problems with their parents. We wanted someone who was this overachiever girl, and you know, those types that you read about. So initially we thought we were going to sort of find the perfect prototypes, and that wasn't a very good idea, actually, because people are not prototypes. People are themselves, and we should have known that from the start, of course. So when we started talking to people, when we started inviting people to interviews, we were going to have this. We wanted to have someone who had been raped, for instance, because rape stories are really important to tell, because everyone who has had that experience feel so alone, because it's impossible to tell about it. And we had one of the boys had a rape story, and that was we thought that was sort of interesting to have that being told by a man and not in the sort of prototypical way. Yeah. And of course, you can't really ask for that on Facebook. We want contact with a person who is. You can't be that exact. We want a man who has been raped. You can't really. But we had that anyway. So we had a team. We had a team and we had this screening procedure where we talked to about from the 300 or so applicants. We chose about 50 who we interviewed in depth, 2-hour interviews, 1 hour by me and 1 hour by the producer. That took some time, and it was very important to do that because we wanted people that were interesting and we wanted people that were likable, because we wanted everybody to be likable. We wanted this to be a good experience, so we didn't want sort of controversial types or something, because that's something else. That's not what we were after. And of course, we made a risk assessment. When you start making a group therapy 12-week program with 8 people, you can't have someone pulling out in session 5 and saying that we will have to cut them from all the sessions. That's impossible. So we had to have people that were likely to show up for all 12 sessions and behave in such a way that it was possible for us to keep them and for them to look back on the whole thing and think that it was a right thing to do for them. So we interviewed them quite thoroughly. And then after the interviews, we had team discussions where we had the TV perspective. That is, how will this person function on camera? How likable is this person? And we had the psychologist perspective, of course, which is it okay for this person to show this and tell his story to the whole of Norway? Does this person understand what that can lead to? And we had a lot of practical issues. Will this person be able to, where do they live? Do they live near an airport or a train station? All that kind of practical issues. And when we had selected 8 people that we really liked and were a sort of a broad assortment of problems, then we had to work on preparing participants for this whole process. um, in research, you need to have informed consent to do experiments. And of course, we also need an informed consent, only it wasn't so easy to inform them because we didn't know. This has never been done before. So what will happen when you show up on TV with your story? We couldn't really tell them, so we had to reflect together. So we had to agree on taking the chance, more or less. So that was our version of informed consent here. And also we had to prepare them for the possible reactions from the public and their own reactions to exposing themselves this way. And the way we prepared them for that was mostly by building a support system and procedures. All contact between other press and the participants should be channeled through the team. We didn't want anyone to be called up from newspapers at home or something. And we had lawyers available in case there was some sort of problems, and we had consultants. And that came in rather handy with this man who told a rape story. He was raped by an asylum seeker. So you can imagine the extreme right Russian web pages. They jumped on that story and blew it up and had a lot to say about this. And it was not fun for the man, and it was even less fun for his family to have that to be contacted by these people. So we had he had a meeting with NRK, the broadcaster, and their lawyers to how to sort of contain this situation, which was, we didn't see this coming. So we had to, but we had this support and procedures system going, and it worked quite well. So it's still those stories are still out there, but no one really cares. And our the advice that he got from NRK, who has lots of experience with this, was to just not comment anything. Just don't say anything to anybody. And that sounds strange, but that's sort of how the extreme right internet pages work. If you say something, they will make everything even bigger. So it's that old saying that don't feed the trolls. If you don't give them anything, they, in a week or two, they'll be concerned about something else. But it's still unpleasant for him to Google himself, of course. So, in preparing participants, when you're doing something that hasn't been done before, you have to just prepare for things that you can't prepare for. So the best thing to do is just build this. They should not face this alone. We should we should be clear about who is going to solve things that show up that no one has been thinking about. And also telling stories or letting people have a glimpse into your life is a very sensitive thing. So we put a lot of effort into preparing a stage for telling, preparing this what should I call it? The situation for telling. Normally, when you work as a therapist, you have you have to build an alliance with the client, and one big part of that alliance is that everything is secret. Nothing is going to go anywhere. So you can say anything to me. I will not judge you or anything. But in this situation, we couldn't do that because it was going to be on TV. So, and also it was going to be a group, and it was not going to be just the therapist. So we had to set up the group in such a way that they could be comfortable talking to each other. And that was, I think that was quite successful, because the members of the group started trusting each other really fast, and it was strange. In one of the home videos from one of the participants, one of them said that, "Oh, I'm really not looking forward to telling this to the other people of the group. What will they think about me?" And he was thinking about what the 7 other members of the group would be thinking, and not the 700,000 people who were going to watch it on TV half a year later. So you're making this. When you're making this sort of circle that, I think it felt quite private to them. It felt like it was. They sort of forgot the cameras, even though there were, these camera people with this big camera on the 3 of them going around, and every time someone was saying something, they were zooming in on them, but in 10 minutes or something, we just forgot about them. It was a really strange experience, actually. And that could be a little bit risky also, because when you forget the cameras, you can start saying things that you wouldn't say if you remembered the cameras. But of course, this wasn't a live broadcast, so there was always possible to cut things afterwards. And we said that, of course, to the participants at the beginning, that we are going to cut this, we are going to treat your stories with respect, and you are going to see everything before it gets out. And the studio itself, that's practical issues, but it needs to be a comfortable place with food and drink available, and TV people are quite amazing they are very good at making this good vibe, no stress situation. If you're participating in the TV debate or at the Lindmo, the talk show or something, everybody is so happy and everybody is so pleasant all the time. You need to be somewhere in 5 seconds now, and it's not you need to be there. It's you need to be there in 5 seconds, and they talk like that all the time, and it's very nice, actually. So what we were trying to do was sort of opening up a potential space for the story rather than extracting the story. In interviews, sometimes in interviews you want to sort of extract the story. You think it's in there and you want to pull it out, but that's not what we were doing. We were more trying to open this space where they could choose what to say or not, and sort of use the potential space. And also we're documenting this ongoing process, so rather than history, so they also filmed themselves, and I, as a therapist, I didn't see their home movies between sessions, because in the session you want things to happen as they happen. You don't, as a therapist, you don't want to know anything that hasn't been said in the sessions, with a few exceptions, of course. At one point, one of the clients got quite suicidal, and the people who saw the home movies, because they delivered their home videos every week, and some other people in the team were watching them. I didn't watch them, but they were quite scared about the home videos that one of the guys delivered, because there was, he had this suicidal talk going. So I had to know that, of course, because if you have clients with suicidal thoughts, you need to take care of that. So we had one session outside of the group, just him and me, and I think we sorted things out, and we told everybody that we had done that, so everybody should know that. That was one of the things that when we were selecting participants, we thought we don't want clients who have suicidal thoughts, because that's really difficult to handle in a TV program, of course. In general, some people think that you shouldn't talk about suicide in the media at all, because someone could get inspired or something. But when we started interviewing those 50 or so people, I think about 40 of them or something had suicidal thoughts, or had suicidal thoughts at some time. So we thought, okay, this is reality, this is part of what we have to show. If we are just going to select among those super healthy types that have never been thinking about suicide, then we will not be representative. This is something that a lot of young people are thinking about, so we need to show that. So we did, and I think in general, I think most people think that suicidal thoughts are more dramatic than psychologists think, because they are much more common than people think. And suicide is uncommon. Suicidal thought is very common. So So I think that's a media taboo that we wanted to challenge, because I think it's I think one of the horrible things about thinking about taking your own life is that you think you're the only one with those thoughts, or you think that thinking that is very dangerous. Well, if I'm thinking that, it means I will do it, but of course it doesn't. Okay, so when we had filmed all those 12 sessions, and we had all the home videos in a big pile, we had almost, I think we had 400 or 500 hours of recordings that were going to be cut into 4 hours of TV, 8 programs, half an hour each. Which means that you need to choose a story to tell. You always have too much material. Everyone who has done anything that looks like science knows that you always have 100 times as much material as you can possibly represent or show in any conceivable way. So choosing the story to tell is very much the art of omitting. So you need to, and this is actually producer work, and even more, it is director work. In making a documentary is no less directed work than any other kind of movie. You need a director, and the director's job is to tell the story. In fiction, you make up the story. In a documentary, you take this big pile of facts and you try to see some sort of structure in them, and you tell that story by picking small pieces that are telling that story. But I suppose you know this because history is very long, and you need to omit almost everything. And one of the things you need to omit is things that can be problematic for third parties. Because when people are telling their stories, it's no way to avoid involving third persons, their parents, teachers, people who have not been very nice to them in some way. And all those third parties, they don't really have a choice. They have just bumped into someone in their lives, and now it's being broadcast. And sometimes you have the right to do that, of course. There was a big discussion about this with Knausgård, as I'm sure you remember. Is it okay for him to tell these stories? What about his dead father who can't defend himself? What about all those other people that are involved in his stories? And this is my personal view, is that I think you have the right to tell everything, more or less, because everybody owns their own life history, and they have a right to own it and to use it and to tell it. But of course, you need to think about the other people who are involved, and press ethics is rather strict on this, because that everyone who is being talked about, especially if it's in a critical way, has a right to have their say in the matter. So all the people that were mentioned by anyone in this group session were called. They received a phone call from our producer, who said that, your daughter is involved in this TV program, and she told her about her childhood, and you didn't, the light that fell on you wasn't very favorable. And some of them objected quite strongly. And so the producer had several phone calls. I had some phone calls also. And we had some meetings with some lawyers and things, and I think we chose sort of conservative solution, where we told minimally. We told as little as possible that could put other people on the spot. So. Because the stories are so rich, when someone is saying that their childhood wasn't so very nice, their parents weren't very nice, and all that, you don't have to. That even saying that gives an impression of what they have been through. You don't really need all the details. You don't need the story about the time that. It's. You can tell very much by telling very little, actually. And also, of course, at the end of some of our programs, we have this note from the producer, saying that in this episode, this participant told about her father being violent to her, and her father says that this is entirely wrong, it never happened, she's a liar, more or less. So you have to do that. You have to have the other person's view, even though you think it's really wrong, actually, in that particular case. Yes, and I mentioned to you that we promised all the participants that we were going to let them see the finished program before it was aired, and we did that. We had almost an entire day when we had the screening for them. We had the participants and me and the producer and the director watching everything, and they could take notes if they didn't want something to be shown, or if they felt that they were being represented in a wrong way or something. And after watching all the episodes, they didn't suggest one single change. So they didn't want us to cut anything that was in, and they thought that what we had put in was okay. So they felt that we had told their stories in a way that they could live with. And then I thought, okay, I'm so glad we did this preparing work, and I'm so glad we took the time to build an alliance with these people, that they trusted us, and we really liked them and respected them, and they felt that. And in the editing process, that respect and the concern for them was the guiding principle. Because TV people are not like some people think TV people are, that they just want drama and they want crazy people doing wild things. That's not what TV people want. They want to tell stories with a human interest, and they really care for their participants. That's my experience anyway. So and also this screening was also very important, because what you don't want when you have a documentary out is that when the documentary is being shown, then some newspaper calls up one of the participants and say, "Did you really consent to this?" And they say, "No, I hate this documentary." You don't want that at all. So you need to have a really strong alliance where this is our product. This is not, we have been filming you, now we are showing it. This is, we made all this together. And afterwards there were some debates and talk shows and all that, and we had some of the participants wanted to be part of that, and they accepted invitations to be in other programs, and some of them didn't. Some of them talked to newspapers, some of them didn't, and that was up to them, of course, because for some of them it was like coming out, and now I'm out, now I'm going to tell my story, now I'm going to talk to everybody. For some of the others it was, I'm going to do this and then I'm finished. Now I'm not going to talk about this anymore. And that's perfectly okay, of course. And a few of them even wrote their own newspaper columns and told their story in their own words. And that was really good. We didn't expect that, but they did. So I must mention that it was a real benefit for us to have this program shown on NRK, which is the major channel in Norway, because that's a sort of a mark of quality in itself. I think maybe that our program would have been more viewed with skepticism and maybe attracted some criticism if it was shown on a very commercial channel with every 10 minutes you see a commercial for something. Because with NRK you have everything is more slow and serious, and that suits our material. So choosing the channel, for this kind of sensitive stuff, it must be in a channel that people trust, so they know that this is not being speculative or sensationalist, but it's done for the right reasons. So I think, yeah, I mentioned this, screening, debrief, follow-up, yes. So the lessons learned for me and for us, the team, what we were worried about was how is this going to be received by the public, and our our experience is that people are very nice, mostly. People reacted well to this, and we even got some awards, the Taboo Award, and we were nominated for Best Documentary at Gullruten and so on. And so both the critics and the general audience embraced these 8 young people and their story, except, of course, the neo-Nazi lot, but they're not my favorite people anyway, so. Yeah, we even got an award from the Psychological Association, because that's a question I often get. What did your fellow psychologist think about this? Because we are opening, we are showing all the sacred tools of the trade and everything, and most psychologists react favorably, I think. So if psychologists are very angry or dismayed or mean or think that this shouldn't have been done, they haven't told me or anyone. And one of the other important lessons, sort of, is I think there's a lesson here about trusting the power of the ordinary. We didn't choose the most colorful or spectacular or crazy people we could. We chose people that were relatable, so people could recognize them and recognize themselves in the participants. So things doesn't have to be extraordinary or strange to be interesting. I think ordinary lives are much more interesting. So, and I think for my own part, I prefer reading biographies or biographical novels about normal people, and I like reading I like reading about normal people doing normal things. I don't need murders or spaceships to be interested, really. I think it's much more interesting to read Knausgård with his. He could write half a page about peeling an orange. I think that's interesting. And another important thing, there was that not so much in mot meg, but in hos Peder, the podcast. In the podcast, I have 4 clients who have individual therapy, and of course, when you have individual therapy, you get much deeper into the person than you can do in group therapy. And people tell some things that are really interesting, and sometimes sometimes when I talk to my clients, I was thinking, I caught myself thinking, oh, this is going to be a really good podcast. And that's not good, because it should be good therapy. It should not be like, I'm going to tell this person about this because my audience will love it. When I caught myself thinking that a few times, particularly with one client. I don't know if you heard this podcast, but one of the clients is Fredrik, a guy who is addicted to his computer habits. He plays game and he watches porn almost all day. And he's very very open about this. He's telling details that are really what should I say, interesting. And it's fun to listen to in a way. And he's so open that at one point I started thinking that's one of his problems, that he doesn't have any boundaries. He could be walking naked down the street, he wouldn't care. So what am I doing here? I'm inviting him to walk naked down the street. And that's not good for him. But it's very good for the podcast. So I had to work with his boundaries concerning the podcast. So that's what we were talking about in one of the sessions, in session 8 or something. How is it for you to expose all these things wearing a microphone? So sometimes, that was a sort of a meta moment, isn't it? When we were talking about the program was being talked about on the program. And that's also interesting. So we could edit away very many other interesting things, because with him it was very important to omit things for his sake, because he didn't. And I said this, that sometimes when people tell stories about criminal behavior and so on, you can't really accuse someone of criminal behavior. So telling a small percentage of reality is enough. And that's one thing I would like to do, is to do the same podcast but with couples. And one of my concerns there is that with couples there will definitely be other people involved. All their illicit affairs will be revealed, and people will recognize themselves, and that will have consequences for other couples as well. So I'm not sure how to deal with that. So we're discussing that now in our team. How do we? But I guess we'll just have to try and see. If it doesn't work, we'll just have to delete a few 100,000 kroner worth of material. But that's life, isn't it? So now we have just finished recording my season 2 with other clients. With you can see that from compared to the first studio, this studio is much grittier and darker, and we are going more into social issues like poverty and immigration, and we're trying to make the therapy process even less therapist driven, even more client driven than the last one. And I'm going to see the finished. We are going to have this screening session with this season 2 next week, and I'm really excited to see how that's going to be. And you can all see it in September or something. So I hope you'll enjoy it.